All right, hey, thanks for joining me in the studio today. I've got a new camera set up here. We're gonna be doing some more painting explanations, taking you into projects I'm working on here in the studio. This happens to be an older demo I did for a workshop. We were talking about atmospheric perspective, which is a huge part of landscape painting. So we had these really blue tones to show, that atmospheric effect happening, and warmer tones in the foreground to kind of bring things forward. That was the main lesson at hand, and I kind of like the little start of it, but ultimately I want to finish this thing. So that requires at least a couple more hours of time working here and refining the elements. Between our background, middle ground, and foreground, there's lots to cover. I think ultimately the blues are too saturated, so I'm going to jump in and modify some of those things using a product called Oleogel by Natural Pigments. Lastly, we'll refine just some of these details and tones to bring it together and make it a really sweet piece. So the goal today, we'll see if we got a couple hours to do it. Come along, join me on the journey, and let's polish this thing up.
All right, so here's the original roughed in demo that I did. Jump in with some bright blue that's actually way too bright, so I tone it back here. If you got a blue that's too bright, the secret is to tone it down with some orange. This is actually probably transparent oxide brown mixed with raw umber. That is one of my go-to glazing kind of mediums. Really is nice, warm, dark. Using the Oleogel, I'm able to create a thin layer of paint, and that's what creates that little glaze effect, and having the warm, transparent colors really sets the mountain back. Now that it's compressed, I can add a little of this white back in and really make it pop. Kind of create that sparkling effect. If you compress the values down, it gives you more range to kind of go back up and add highlights. Almost like toning a drawing and then adding, using an eraser actually to make your highlights. That's what it feels like. Here I'm just defining the edge of the mountain. I really want to give those edges really clear delineation against the sky. And adding a little bit of cloud. Just a suggestion of it. These are more small details, building a bit of information. Adding that turquoise green color to the glacier. There's where the crevasses are showing through. You can see some beautiful colors in there sometimes. Now this little area is adding that white, and this is actually not glazing, it's called scumbling, but I'm adding some more opaque paint and pushing things back just a little bit more, trying to balance it out between where the sky is, how light the sky is and how blue it is, with where the mountain can then be. Getting as close as I can really allows that depth to really be exaggerated. Don't want my face popping in. Occasionally I get too into it and I forget that I'm being filmed. Moving more forward, I'm able to add even more light paint to an area that was traditionally a little bit darker. And this is that compression phase where I'm really trying to squeeze things together, particularly in that background. The closer they are in value and color, the further back they seem. And that's what the workshop was really all about, was explaining kind of atmospheric perspective and how it works in painting. If I add more light to the sky, it makes that mountain brighter, and I can even go lighter with the mountain now. I'm scumbling in a bit more blue into the sky. Working on those gradients, thinking about having some really soft, beautiful transitions of color if I can, and value. Places where the paint might have seemed patchy or a little, broken brushwork, anything like that, if there's white showing through to the canvas, this is the phase that I go ahead and seal those up and really get a smoother finish on it. Simplifying this mass of the forward mountain, erasing some of that detail that I had put in, but the good part is I can always go through and add more back, especially with oil paint. Starting to move more forward now to that middle ground zone. See, the shapes I'm refining are so subtle. There's not much going on here, and I don't really even go so far as to say that I'm adding detail. I'm just trying to add information, not detail for detail's sake. Scumbling in some more lighter opaque blues and really able to push an extra level of depth out of this piece by moving that foreground away from the middle ground, and just glazing things back to compress them again. This is a word I'll use a lot and think about a lot when I'm glazing. It's just compression. Finishing off the edges, that's a big piece of the finishing stage. Anything that was left open or undone, I go ahead and seal those off and give it a better look. Even if it's going to be behind a frame, I still like my piece to hold. Hopefully whenever someone takes it out of the frame, they can say that I took my job seriously. Usually glazed in more warmths, very subtly, but that orange tone really brings that foreground cliff more forward than it was as that yellow pale color. It's kind of creating that glazing base. Now I can really punch some darks. These are as extreme as I can make them. I'm really going to push them dark and inky in order to set that really dark foreground effect, and it's just going to push those mountains even further back. Everything is related in painting. If you make one decision, it'll affect another decision. Here I use a paper towel to just kind of push those things, just soften them out a little bit. Painting with paper towels is pretty fun. Gives you a randomness that brushes struggle with. You see now with that further dark, I was able to add more light there. It's all a balancing act. And it all has an influence on each other. Even lightening the forward clip as it comes up. Just giving just a little bit of gradient, and that can go a long way. Specular highlights, definitely more detail elements in this way. That's just information that helps the viewer feel like they're somewhere with more information up close. Stuff to look at. Even if you can see I'm not really painting anything. These kind of marks I akin to almost improv. I react to them in a very automatic way. Of course, this footage is sped up, but I'm not belaboring every single brush stroke. Nature itself is so random and chaotic, and the melodies are so quiet, but if I can mimic some of that nature feel, then that's a hopefully more successful effect for the landscape. So I switch to the mountain and I'm gonna punch in more of those details. You see that the band of stone in Glacier Park that's visible, at least on the whole eastern side. I need to memorize the title of it every time I forget, but so I put it in with a thin round brush and then mop it back with this larger old crappy, I just call them mops, but there's an old round brush too, and it really softens out those detail effects but gives a little bit more information back there. And smoothing these little gradients around with that transparent, darker tone. It's really, see, this doesn't feel like detail to me. It just feels like modifications, little bits of information that are changing how the light effect is happening. Making that middle ground edge stand out against the background. random cliffs and rocks. And here in this foreground, I'm going to use some of that inky dark to define some rock shapes. Just build, again, just information. I'm not worried about depicting any particular type of rock right now. I'm just building it up so it reads well with the foreground, middle ground, and background. Back to adding some highlights in here. It's definitely not a one and done thing. See, I've painted over a lot of these places and maybe even changed things that I put down earlier. I'm really letting this process happen as a type of exploration. These nice bright reds are really going to bring the foreground up. I'm breaking that tangent with that tree, the old stag that was sticking out there, giving it some information too that lets the viewer have more to see. With that, I jump back into the middle ground to add more forest effects and trees that bring that area into a more living, breathing feeling instead of just a big barren chunk of dirt and grass. This also gives me a chance to modify these trees. As I repaint in that mountain to change the size of some trees. Linear perspective is really emphasized by the height of trees, power lines or buildings. Anything like that in the landscape really help tell the scale. So it's important to get that drawing right. Those trees in, I kind of come back to tweak the foreground. Pushing things back, pushing things forward. It really feels like a tug of war in a sense, that I'm just modifying little elements of the painting in very small ways, but it does have a consequence. Back to the glacier, giving it even more form and definition. Getting some lights behind these trees that really give the sense of scale. It gives a little bit more pop, which is fun. Warming up my darks, bringing that foreground more into the foreground. I've reworked this little cliff edge 5 times probably. I call this rim light, just adding some background light. Oh, and here we go with the waterfall. Gotta have a waterfall coming out of the glacier. Some more highlights in the foreground. And these are things I've painted and repainted several times now in this piece. Just waiting for that final lightest light. It's something I try to hold out for. I don't want to use it too early. And I'm soften this area back because I'm going to add my signature right there. There we go. Finishing marks of the piece. Try to make the last part signing. Just feels good. With that, this piece is done. There's that original roughed in version. You can see things are just simple, chunky, rough. And it evolves into the more sophisticated, developed studio piece that I'm happy to bring to galleries and put into shows.
Thanks for following along. I hope you learned something. If you have other questions about my techniques or about painting in general, please leave me a comment or send a message. I'd love to help you out. This YouTube channel I want to be about education and growth and hopefully sharing some of my skills I've learned along the way. I've got a lot of painting to do this winter, so there'll be a lot more videos coming out soon. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.